Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Tizengauzen with you. Today is September 17th. There are a lot of interesting news stories. In this episode, an extraordinary and very painful package of sanctions from Ukraine against Russia. Dozens of crucial facilities have been destroyed. We'll talk about how Hamas has decided to use hostages in Gaza as human shields. And you might wonder, what does Putin have to do with all this? And today, we'll watch a video. Europe and Ukraine will build a wall against drones while Poland is asking for nuclear weapons for itself. And it turns out the call for European Union countries not to buy Russian oil wasn't meant for everyone. And apparently, some countries have a special status. This was stated by the European Union itself. Well, what will Donald Trump have to say about this? We'll find out today. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff, so let's get started. So I call this the Direct Action Sanctions Package from the GUR, SBU and Magyar Birds. This is the most effective sanctions package, drone and missile strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation. Here, they've summed up the results for the month. There were 45 serious hits alone. So over the month, 13 Russian oil refineries were hit. Their total capacity is 114 million tons per year. A fuel collapse has already crept up unnoticed in 20 Russian regions, and it's getting close to Moscow. In general, the most effective sanctions are strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation. Also, 8 oil depots, 2 airfields, 3 straitjackets, 12 railway infrastructure facilities, 3 ports and warehouses, and 6 enterprises in the industrial complex. All of these have been visited by Ukrainian drones and missiles. Well done. By the way, today there will be some amazing parallels if we're talking about Russia that show terrorists and maniacs often think in very similar and predictable ways. So here's the news. Hamas wants to use hostages as human shields, according to Khan. The families are afraid for their lives, which is completely understandable. And the families of the hostages held a rally, protesting outside Benjamin Netanyahu's house, and issued a warning that this night in Gaza could be the last for the hostages, because if a large-scale operation begins, if they move into Gaza, then Hamas terrorists will use the hostages like this. They've already brought them out of the tunnels, placed them in front of important sites, and are waiting for those sites to be hit. Well, in general, it's all clear. Trump, in a rage, wrote on his social network that he hopes the Hamas leadership understands what they're getting into if they do something like this. This is a cruelty the likes of which the world has never seen before. Release all the hostages immediately. But no, the world has seen and continues to see such cruelty every day. And it is this cruelty that allows evil to exist, because there is no strong response. But we'll talk about that a bit later. In general, it's truly astonishing that after the atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th, 2023, the whole world should have declared a hunt for the members of this group until every person involved was completely eliminated. It shouldn't have been just Israel dealing with this. But I won't describe these atrocities now. I'm sure you can easily find that information yourself. It's just horrifying. They're simply not human at all. And now they're going to use hostages as human shields, and so on. But some people, by the way, like certain environmental activists before chanting freedom for Palestine, could have also chanted freedom for the hostages. But there's a reason I started with this news. Hamas has an excellent teacher who, long before, explained how to hide behind innocent people, women and children, and use them as hostages. What do you think? What is the name of this teacher? Well, let's watch this video. This doesn't worry me, because we are not going to and will not fight against the Ukrainian people. There is a Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian military exists. Or do you not believe that? Listen to me, just listen carefully. I want to make sure I am understood unambiguously. If we make such a decision, it will be solely to protect Ukrainian citizens and let anyone among the military try to shoot at their own people, whom we will be standing behind them, not in front, but behind. Let them try to shoot at women and children. I want to see the person who would give such an order in Ukraine. The Ukrainian troops would not dare to shoot. Well, that's basically what he ended up doing. And here, there should probably be some kind of conclusion, like, why are some terrorists hunted all over the world, destroyed in bunkers and caves, while others are greeted with handshakes and people boast about having good relations with them? Later in this program, I will show you even more horrifying. parallels with another global evil. In the meantime, let me remind you that we have an important fundraiser for our combat medics and for everyone who wants to support our doctors and surgeons, who are making incredible efforts right now to save the lives of our soldiers. I suggest supporting this fundraiser. It's for the first separate medical battalion for all these bright and strong people, our combat medics. Watch this video, I will be showing it often. Military medicine is not just about working in operating rooms. It's also the constant, large-scale construction of stabilization points, field hospitals, and other facilities for work. It's the ongoing risk of relocations, logistics, and vehicle repairs. And this requires a constant availability of resources, meaning money. When a need arises, we don't have time for fundraising and long searches. We need to work quickly. Together with Boris Tizengauzen's channel, we are announcing a fundraiser for our unit's needs. We are raising 800,000 hryvnias for the battalion's needs, specifically for building materials, equipment, vehicle repairs, and consumables. This money will help us work efficiently and quickly address our needs. We thank everyone who supports our unit. Your support helps save lives. Yes, they're all so young. They should be spending these years living their best lives, falling in love, starting families. But instead, they're saving lives, risking their own every single day. But just look at how strong they are, how genuine. This is what Ukrainians are like. And now it's clear why Putin has completely lost by attacking Ukraine. For our medics, for the 1st Medical Battalion, the link to donate is in the description. For this video, the donation link is in the comments. There's Mono, there's Private, there's PayPal for anyone who wants to help from abroad. And to everyone who helps, I personally want to say a sincere thank you. But if you're watching not on my channel, here's a QR code. It leads to the donation page. Russia has started involving children taken from Ukraine in assembling drones. These parallels of evil will run throughout the entire program, but I still want us to see and hear about this. So, Russia is involving children taken from Ukraine in assembling drones. In total, Russia is using 210 facilities to raise, house, re-educate children, to run various programs for them, to organize things. Since 2022, through the Smena camp in Krasnodar, more than 300 children from just the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions have passed through the camp in Krasnodar Krai. There are a large number of such camps in Russia. They take children to Artek and to other camps as well. In other words, they take the children out. And then this kind of work begins with them. They organized a camp focused on innovation and technology, where children are already being involved in the production of weapons. At the very least, one group of children, along with assembling drones, also put together mine detectors, robots, rapid charging devices for assault rifles, and so on. I went to the website of this camp, Smena, and there they have meetings, I'll quote, meetings of the kids with participants of the so-called special military operation and evenings of patriotic songs. They have a bunch of master classes, including ones like this, in addition to floristry and design. There are courses on operating unmanned aerial systems, and you can learn the basics of piloting a drone there. Well, we all understand that on Putin's orders, funding for this infrastructure for children's patriotic organizations has been significantly increased. That's a fact. The fact is that in Russia, children are literally involved in militarization processes, from kindergarten, assembling drones, war games, development. They have an entire system set up for this. In a playful way, children are somehow drawn into all these militaristic projects. At first, you control bees and protect the planet. Then, as you get older, you fly a little drone. Then a bit later, your drone has to deliver a bottle or give a drink to a kitten and so on. And then, when you're even older, the drone is supposed to drop munitions on someone. On so-called, in their opinion, some kind of brotherly peoples. Although I don't know if they even have any brotherly peoples left over there. Well, I mean, whoever they consider to be a brotherly people. In this case, it's astonishing how much modern Putin's Russia resembles Nazi Germany. Because I took this news precisely because children from the occupied Ukrainian territories are being taken away, indoctrinated, reprogrammed with propaganda, taught how to operate drones, and then, what do you think, for what purpose? I'm pretty sure it's not for agricultural projects. So it's astonishing how much modern Russia resembles Nazi Germany. In Nazi Germany, there was a project, the Lebensborn program, a program of racial selection. This program operated not only in Poland, but also in other occupied territories. It was created by Heinrich Himmler himself. In other words, it was essentially a program for the Germanization of children. There is even a term for this. Polish children were made into Germans. Children who were considered racially valuable were forcibly taken from their parents and Germanized. They were raised in German families or institutions, their names were changed, their native language was forbidden, and so on. According to the Nuremberg Tribunal, more than 200,000 children were abducted from Poland alone. Most of them never returned to their families. But the goal was to deprive the nation of its future, while simultaneously enriching the German people. And of course, the Hitler Youth indoctrinated the children. It didn't matter where they came from or which families they were taken from. That's why all the modern Putin youth organizations, now called the Young Army, the Movement of the First, or whatever they're called, are an absolute copy of Nazi Germany. As for the Russification of Ukrainian children, I don't know if there's even such a term, the possibility of running them through similar camps, reprogramming their minds with propaganda, meeting with all these so-called heroes. Here you have the same copy from Nazi Germany. Well, let's move on to economic news. Now it's really going to be fire. I thought, I wouldn't see news like this. But no, I open up RBC Russia for monitoring and I can't believe my eyes. Here you go, as they say, today's news from the Russian economy. The high-security colony, Black Dolphin Penal Colony number 6 in the Orenburg region, has increased sales of goods produced by inmates. This was reported by the regional office of the Federal Penitentiary Service. The highest demand is for figurines made from breadcrumb, backgammon, and chess sets. That is, in the first 8 months of this year, the Dolphin store at the colony sold goods worth 11 million rubles, while for the entire previous year, the revenue was 11 million, that is, in 8 months they fulfilled the annual quota. But in addition to souvenir products, the Dolphin store also offers workwear, barbecue grills, furniture, taxidermy animals, and food products. I thought this was just some kind of joke, but no, this is just a regular news story for Russia. That's probably exactly why Putin said that sanctions are not scary. So it turns out that if half of Russia is in business, according to Putin, the business plan is already set. If you put half of Russia in prison, can you imagine how many figurines made from breadcrumbs they could make? As I understand it, he already has a ready-made business model. One half of Russians will sit in prison making figurines out of breadcrumbs, and the other half will buy all of it. And then they'll switch places. So what a truly wild country this is. This is the Russian Federation. Sometimes it seems like there just can't be news like this. Surely Patriarch Kirill can't just come out and call the war sacred. But no, he can, and he does. Surely they can't be flying around in helicopters waving those brooms of theirs. An airborne religious procession against drones. That just can't be real. But it is. Surely they can't be blessing intercontinental ballistic missiles. Turns out they can. Priests really do bless them. What is this? What kind of country is this? And by the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. British scientists have noticed that those who subscribe to calm analytics save significantly on tranquilizers. So breathing exercises, meditation, all that's in the past. In the future, it's all about calm analytics. And once again, about the sanctions on Shrio Dengar. By the way, an extremely interesting detail came to light regarding these sanctions, which seem to appear and disappear. Or maybe they're Shakespearean sanctions, I don't even know how to put it, to be or not to be. It turns out that not everyone in the European Union is required to stop buying Russian oil. Some have a special status, specifically within the North Atlantic Alliance. But let's take it step by step. After talks with Trump, the head of the European Commission is urging EU countries to speed up their move away from Russian oil and gas. Well, sure, speed it up, but actually there wasn't such a condition in the first place. All these ultimatums from Trump, the 1st, the 2nd, the 5th, the 10th, none of them assumed that someone had to do something first, and only then would he impose sanctions. He was like, I'll impose them right now. No, let's give it 50 days. No, let's give it 10 days. Let's just I don't know how many days, but actually I never said that. Let me think for a moment. Then he came out and said, let them stop buying first. Well, that's a brief summary of the events. So, who exactly has special conditions and who doesn't necessarily have to stop buying Russian oil? Hungary stated that for them and for Slovakia, Trump is ready to make an exception since he takes their special situation into account. I'm thinking, who is this clever person and what exactly is this special situation? It turns out there really was such a statement. Hungary does not intend to give up importing Russian oil in the foreseeable future due to the lack of viable alternatives, said Hungarian Minister for EU Affairs János Boka following negotiations in Brussels. And according to him, the US is much more understanding of Budapest's position than Brussels is. And Boka claims that Trump takes their special situation into account. Do you know why they call it special? Because Hungary and Slovakia have no access to the sea, so they have to transport it differently, only through pipelines, and that means only Russian oil. Of course, they're lying, but that's a topic for a separate program. So you don't have access to the sea, right? But for example, the Czech Republic and Austria in the European Union also don't have access to the sea. So how did they manage? How is it that they're not throwing a fit and not only saying they'll buy Russian oil, but are also lobbying to lift sanctions on Russian oligarchs? How does this relate to Russian oil? Well, I know it's directly related, but how does it work within the European Union? What are the excuses here? I'd also like to hear confirmation of Hungary and Slovakia's special position from Donald Trump himself. For example, I haven't heard him say anything about this. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. So then, who is Donald Trump demanding to stop buying Russian oil? It would be really good if journalists soon, since Trump likes to, whether on the plane, between golf games, after or before golf, he likes it, to answer journalists' questions. Not all of them, of course. If only someone would ask him this: is it true that there will be an exception for Hungary and Slovakia, that they will continue to buy Russian oil, and that the US isn't demanding that they stop buying it? And if that's true, then who else are you demanding this from? Now that would be a question, right? But it's possible that Donald Trump would answer the way he did just yesterday to a journalist. Let me quote. The reporter asks if a sitting president should be as active in business as you are. Trump says, "Where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Australia." And Trump responds to him, "You are now doing great harm to Australia. I'll tell your leader about this. Shut up." Unique. This, by the way, is a classic narcissism, to remain in a childish position when you hear an uncomfortable question or when there is a problem that you do not want to solve. To cover your ears and say, blah, 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 I can't hear you, I can't see you, I don't want to hear or to think that if you hide under a blanket, all the problems will just disappear. You can also say that it's not your problem, it's the problem of your mom, dad, Zelensky or Biden. You can say that too. Or you can take an adult position and remember that you are the president of the #1 country in the world and say, wait a second, does someone not believe in the ultimatum of the President of the United States? Someone whose economy is smaller than the economy of the state of Texas wants to question our resolve? Specifically, I am sending this message right now through the screen to that balding pensioner. And I think everyone over there will understand, everyone will hear it. And while Trump keeps coming up with new excuses for why he can't impose sanctions, while he's doing that, Putin keeps erasing more and more red lines regarding NATO, where the US is the key player. That's the news. He sabotages, he spies, he kills. That's how Merz accused Putin of destabilizing Europe. And Merz, well, by the way, said some good things. He has long been testing the limits. He sabotages, he spies, and he kills. He tries to undermine confidence. Russia wants to destabilize our society. Well, when it comes to destabilizing society, or especially Germany and Europe as a whole, you probably owe more thanks to someone else. To the Chancellor. Yes, I don't know how Merz came up with all this, how she planted this migrant bomb under the European Union. Well, that was just some kind of classic operation. And now determination is needed, and we handled everything instantly. And Merz also emphasized that Ukraine's capitulation to Russia is unacceptable. This will only push Putin to look for his next target. It's also important to say the right words right now. Not being afraid to call a murderer while understanding all the political consequences is also important. But words alone won't destroy Putin. In response to harsh words, he'll send drones into NATO countries' territory. And he'll create even more interference with electronic warfare systems for European planes and shipping. They're building an entire giant station in the Kaliningrad region just to terrorize people. Just to terrorize. Airspace, I'll say more. I already mentioned this in yesterday's episode. Putin, through Medvedev, he's become so brazen that through Medvedev he voiced the idea that if anyone touches Russian assets frozen in Europe, Russia will pursue them, and I quote, including by extrajudicial means. In other words, European officials are being threatened with physical violence. We'll poison you with some substances. Whatever we find, just don't touch Russian assets. So, words are good, but Ukraine has long been waiting for the Taurus missiles. I think the coalition of the willing should have already become a coalition of action, and Ukraine is not going to capitulate. I think it's long been clear to everyone that what will push Putin to choose his next target is not Ukraine's refusal to surrender, but the fact that he's allowed to keep what he's stolen and even have sanctions lifted from him. As for the next target, it's actually quite logical that it would be a country sharing a border with Russia. And here, the options aren't that numerous. In large part, it could be the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. In light of the latest harsh statements, there could even be a provocation against Finland, because Medvedev, the same one who was crawling around the Finnish border area looking for something, he claimed that Finland, it turns out, is preparing a springboard for an attack on Russia. They're all a bit unwell over there. Someone is always supposedly preparing a springboard for an attack on them, even Ukraine. And Latvia and Lithuania will be preparing one too. Well, in general, and Poland too, which shares a border with Russia in the Kaliningrad region and borders Belarus. By the way, we know that Lukashenko has already allowed Putin to use his territory once for an attack on Ukraine, so this scenario can't be ruled out either. And as for Donald Trump, who thinks that Europe will stop buying and that he'll get some kind of delay, he won't get it, who thinks that things should be softer with Russia, that having a good relationship with Putin is normal, and that we shouldn't, anger him. Well, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov, responded to him directly. He claims that Ukraine rejected the proposal that the US Special Representative, Witko, delivered after the meeting in Alaska. And he asserts that Kyiv is sabotaging US efforts, and, together with Europe, is trying to convince Trump to abandon peacekeeping efforts. Yes. And so, the most important thing in Lavrov's statement is that he emphasizes one interesting thing. According to Lavrov, Moscow and Washington discussed, among other things, the ban on the UOC, and the US understands that human rights violations in Ukraine are unacceptable. How concerned they've become about the UOC lately. Should we call it the ROC, or more accurately, the FSB, if we're being completely precise? How afraid they are that these devils in cassocks will be thrown out of Ukraine. They're terribly afraid. How will they reprogram people's minds then? And I'm telling you, it's an extremely powerful tool. Extremely powerful, really. Dozens of cases were opened by the SBU right after the full-scale invasion against these priests, who openly, and especially in the occupied territories, welcomed the occupiers with bread and salt. And there were weapons, stockpiles in the churches. So, this is an extremely powerful tool. And also Lavrov sent his regards. Donald Trump stated that if Western troops are sent to Ukraine, they will essentially be considered occupying forces and legitimate targets for Russian military. But if Ukraine allows a peacekeeping mission to be stationed on its own territory, that's an internal matter for Ukraine. There's only one occupying force here, the armed forces of the Russian Federation. In other words, they've completely lost all sense of restraint. They're openly threatening European officials. They're threatening Western troops, including American soldiers. Donald Trump, wake up. Someone over there has really gone too far. Although I think, like in that old joke, but I'm not even asleep. Ukraine will share its developments with the European Union to protect against Russian drones. This is news that would have been hard to imagine before the full-scale invasion, but here we are. These are the realities today. The EU has decided to build a wall against drones using Ukrainian technologies. A budget will be allocated, and the system will be able to respond in real time. It will be jointly developed, jointly deployed, and jointly operated. Ursula von der Leyen announced this. I get it. It's a great idea, a wonderful initiative. The main question is, where will this wall begin? Well, that is, if it starts right at the border with Ukraine and then continues on to Poland, for example, over there into the European Union, then it turns out that the European Union is only protecting itself. With the help of our technologies, yes, we are ready to help our allies, yes. But if this wall is meant to shoot down these drones somewhere much earlier over the territory of Ukraine, this joint infrastructure, that's a completely different story. So let's wait for the details. But for some reason, I think... Alright, write in the comments where you think this wall will be located. Poland has announced its intention to deploy nuclear weapons on its territory with the help of France. See what these Russian drones are causing? So Poland should have its own nuclear capabilities. The president made this statement. Not just energy and civilian ones, but military as well. And in partnership with France, they want to deploy nuclear weapons on their territory. Well, it makes sense. Why is Putin allowed to transfer nuclear warheads to Lukashenko, but others aren't? Honestly, all of Putin's sane neighbors should acquire nuclear weapons. But in the near future, this is probably only possible for Poland because obviously there are a lot of bureaucratic and legal issues involved. The non-proliferation treaty, but Poland isn't asking to be given or sold nuclear weapons. That's impossible. In other words, the practice of nuclear sharing exists in NATO, and it's possible to deploy one country's nuclear weapons elsewhere. Let me remind you, in the European Union, there's only one country, France, that has them, then there's the UK, and of course the United States across the ocean. These countries, in theory, can share part of their nuclear weapons, stationing the delivery systems and pilots in the countries where the weapons are deployed, while control over the warheads remains with the country that owns them. This is exactly what the US does. The US has deployed nuclear weapons in 5 countries: Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. That's the official arrangement. Now Poland is asking France for the same. Let our pilots and delivery systems be used, but you keep control, just in case. You see what's happening? And all of this is happening simply because no one can rein in one bald jelly. So, in the near future, we're most likely in for a new multi-episode series called Why Can't I Impose Sanctions? But maybe it is high time to demonstrate to the world that the number one country really is number one, and the president has a clear responsibility to live up to that. And this continued fear of what is essentially a cornered rat, well, that is simply not funny or acceptable anymore. Friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's support the fundraiser for our strong, brave, and truly dedicated medics for the 1st Medical Battalion. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and glory to Ukraine.